Okay. So, you read the description. I don't have to give you all that back information, right? Okay. So, the first thing I'm going to go over is adjusting your mount sensitivity and honing your control for precision shots. And this works in any game, any first-person shooter, any first-person or even third-person mode. And there's a little bit of a finesse to this that most people don't realize. I've met a lot of people, had a lot of friends that had trouble with this. And so I'm going to show you the system that I developed years ago when I was competitively playing CSGO, and then and on our tournament, and then I just transferred it to all the other first-person shooters that I play. So, number one, in the settings, there are different mouse sensitivity settings in this game. It's different in different games, like Winter was saying earlier. In this game, there are custom zoom levels for each sensitivity. I mean, custom sensitivities for each zoom level, excuse me. I'm dyslexic. My back's really bad. So, the longer the zoom you have, the more sensitive it will be to your mouse movement. So, for instance, when you're using 1 to 4x, it will be somewhat sensitive, and when you are zoomed out a lot farther, of course, the more you move your gun, the more of an effect it's going to have, because the image that you're shooting at is so far away. Does that make sense? It's like shooting a rocket and aiming at the moon. Even 1 degree can put you really, really badly off course. That's why the rockets to the moon have a constant course adjustment system that monitors the angle, because it constantly has to course correct, because any little minute change in course when you're trying to go that far ends up being a huge difference. Does that make sense? Okay. In future trainings, I'll probably actually use a graphic to demonstrate that, because there's specific math to that that makes more sense visually than it does verbally. But if that makes sense to you, then great. So, basically what that means is you usually have to turn down the sensitivity the more of a zoom you have to make it more what you're used to. Now, since Winter's already used to compensating for that, he's not doing that. What he's doing is cranking up his normal mouse sensitivity, because he's got it tuned for ADS, since he ADSs so much. Which would probably work a little bit better for me in some ways, because most of the time that I'm shooting, I'm ADSing. I very rarely hip fire. But yeah. Well, even for... Yeah. It may make so little difference in your scopes if you're using, like, say, 1 to 4, that you might not even have to worry about that. So you can pay attention to the difference between when you're ADS'd and you're not ADS'd, and see how that goes. But there's also the ADS multiplier here. So there's 3 different ADS systems. There's there's 3 different mouse sensitivity systems. There's normal mouse sensitivity, there's ADS sensitivity, and then there's per zoom customization. Does that make sense? So if you're ADS'd using iron sights, it's going to be a little bit different in sensitivity than it is the higher you go on the zoom. But it may not, if you're using that small of a zoom, make that big of a difference that you might even need to worry about that. And normal mouse sensitivity, ADS, might be the only ones you need. So those are the different settings involved. Now, when it comes to actually testing that, so in the firing range, there's 2 ways to test this. Number 1, you want to test it just standing still. Pay attention to how much the gun drifts per the sensitivity of the zoom that you're using, if you're using zoom at all. Okay. Number 2, you want to be able to quick scope. Okay. Now, there's 2 different ways to do this. I used to get the dot on first and then ADS. That's actually how snipers quickscope in this and a lot of other quickscope available shooters, especially sniping. Now, you can also get very close to being there and then zoom in and adjust your sensitivity. And that's what I tend to do because, especially in Modern Warfare being a run-and-gun game, I'm using automatic shooting. And so I don't have to worry as much about my position for just one shot because I'm using an automatic weapon. Now, it's not good to get that habit built when you don't have a good habit built for precision shooting with sniping if you're going to be doing that kind of precision shooting at all, because it leads to lazy shooting habits. And a lot of people do this, and this is why snipers in a lot of first-person shooters will out-snipe anybody who's run and gunning, because they are not precision shooting. Yes, and this is why, because we are more accurate. We have to train ourselves to be more accurate because we only get one shot. If you can pray and spray, you can be a lot less accurate and just go all over the fucking place. If you're sniping, you have to be precise, and if you're using something that's slow like bolt action where you can't just shoot over and over again, then you've got a problem. Because if you miss, you've got a delay before you can shoot again. You're screwed. They've got time to react and shoot you. So you have to get your first shot perfect. Make sense? So you're better off training to actually get your dot where you need to go first and getting in here. However, that being said, sometimes you need to do it too fast, and it's easier to do it when you're zoomed in. That's another reason why I've tended to do this a little bit more in this game, and in certain other games that have this big of a difference in zoom and this much of a distance. In games like the old Battlefields, like Battlefield 2, where you had smaller maps, you're not dealing with as much of a distance. You don't have to be as precise because it doesn't take as much to aim. It takes less to make sure that I'm accurate on my aim on this front dummy than it does on the back one. Okay? I have to really adjust to be able to get his head. But right here, I'm there, real quick and easy. Okay? I can be precision, I can be moving around, he can be moving around, and I can get on there real easy. I'm right on his face. Real fast. I can't do that here. Okay, he's too far away. It takes too much of a pixel adjustment. Make sense? So, number one, you want to adjust so you can quickly get on their heads, even at farther range. And at close range, it's easier to use the dot first, if you're precise, before you zoom. And that way, you can get on his head, and even before you zoomed in, here's quickscoping technique. You can actually just hit the quickscoping button and fire before you're even zoomed. That make sense? I am not shooting once I'm zoomed in. I am not waiting until I'm zoomed and precisely aimed to shoot. I am getting the dot where I need to go. I can shoot from here, but it does seem in some games to be a little bit more accurate if I hit zoom first, but I do not have to be all the way zoomed in. That is trick shooting quickscoping, as it's called in Modern Warfare. One of my buddies taught me that. I'm not used to doing it. Make sense? When you're trying to be fast, like I just was demonstrating with the back one, you can miss. Okay? So, the farther away it is, the more you're going to have to precise aim and take your time before you can get his head. And my hand is cramping because I've been gaming so much. I spent like 9 hours gaming last night. I was up until 5 in the morning. But the closer it is, the easier it is to aim. So the farther away it is, the more you have to take your time, especially when you're sniping. Make sense? Now, there's another aspect to this, and it's really important for games where you're in a movement arena. If there's not a lot of room and you're shooting down a corridor, they can't really run that much, so you don't have to worry about it as much. It's easier to aim at them. But if you're having to shoot across the map and they're moving all over the fucking place, you really need to be precise. So, another one of the things that you do is you lead your target while they're moving. And I'm trying to talk and think at the same time, so I'm not doing as well as I could. But basically what it is you get it moving first. And you have to switch in order for it to move in. Once it moves, it stays there. So you can do this and predictably aim where he's going to be. Does that make sense? It didn't move all the way across yet. But basically you move where it's going to be. You see what I'm saying? And again, I'm talking, so I'm not doing as well. The video I recorded earlier that screwed up and didn't get the audio, I was much better. Let's see. Make sense? Okay. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. When I'm not trying to talk and think, it's easier. When I'm talking and thinking, it doesn't work so well. So that's. You want to practice getting your head shot, or at least a good body shot if you can't do that, depending on how good you are. It takes practice. But the main thing is you want to practice getting move shots. Okay? And you want to be able to, you're not even just shooting necessarily, you want to be able to quick aim on move. And if you find that you're getting too far ahead of them, or you're lagging behind them, see how I was dragging a little bit on the left side? If you're trying to follow your target instead of lead your target, you can end up dragging. But also, not only is it harder when you're trying to follow instead of lead your target, but you're also dealing with a mouse sensitivity issue sometimes. Like right now, I think my sensitivity is a little off and I need to change it. So it's actually convenient that I'm doing this training today because I was already planning on actually adjusting my mouse sensitivity. So if I find that I'm going too far ahead, my mouse sensitivity might be a little too high. If I'm dragging behind and I'm not able to keep up with it, then my mouse sensitivity might be too low. Does that make sense? But if you practice on just the dummy up front, you can have a problem. Because remember, the farther away you are, the more drastic the change in your sensitivity is. So I might be fine up close, but what if I'm trying to speed aim too far away, it's not getting precise enough, fast enough, because it's too sensitive. So you have to balance close range and far range. And zoom. So there's 3 different factors that you're dealing with if you're using scopes. There's near sensitivity, far sensitivity, and scope sensitivity per zoom level in COD. Does that make sense? So you really have to play with it to figure out how to get precise as possible on all 3 distances and on the different zooms. It's different when I'm using this than I am using the far range. Because it's a closer sight, my movement is more sensitive. It's faster. My movement gives more aim change on the far distance than the close. Does that make sense? Any little movement can throw me way off here. So, go ahead and practice that for a minute, and I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So, you've been practicing that a little bit? So you're dragging a little bit when you try and aim? Okay, so that means you need to turn up your mouse sensitivity a little bit. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but my mouse sensitivity is ridiculous. So you can't go by my numbers for multiple reasons. Number one, I've trained in Unreal Tournament, and I've got some techniques that I'll go over in a minute that take my precision to a superhuman level. I have learned from ancient samurai. I have learned from gold medal winning athletic coaches and athlete trainers in the Olympics. I've learned from a whole bunch of experts on different things. Okay. If you read my post about this, I've learned from some serious experts. So I use some advanced techniques I'm going to go over in a minute. that take this stuff to a whole new level. So my precision aiming is crazy. I've got my sensitivity really fast. Now, it's not just because of that. I also am using a ergonomic mouse that's made for people who are on computers all the time, because I work on the computer and I play on the computer. And so I'm on the computer a lot. And I have problems with what's called tendonitis, which means basically you're moving the muscle too much in the same exact way, and it overworks the muscle. And it's in a way that often strains or keeps the muscle taut. Make sense? Because I'm sitting here trying to hold something and move the mouse, I'm constantly tensing the muscles in my hand and my wrist. And if I do that too much, it actually messes with the tendon and the muscles. So I have to use a special mouse that's for that tries to keep that at a minimum. And that has a little bit different handling. And I don't like changing my settings between graphic design and gaming and trying to remember which setting I had for which. So I adjust my mouse to my design work, and then I just change my settings in game for gaming. And I've got it down to such a science that usually doesn't take that long. It usually takes me maybe a few games to get most of it down, and the pinpoint precision that I was talking about earlier, I can hone, especially the different zoom levels. I used to have all that done, but a recent patch actually reset all of my settings, and so I don't have any of the custom zoom levels adjusted anymore. Yeah, really frustrating, because that took a lot of time. That kind of precision level takes that's something that I do over weeks of playing the game, because you have to take the time to practice with the different guns, with the different zoom levels. It's a bit of a pain to have to do over again, so I haven't gone back and done that yet. But because I use that different mouse that's on a different sensitivity for graphic design, I keep this really high. But it is a little too high, so I'm going to be tweaking it anyways. But yeah, that is one of the few ways in which they actually weren't entirely false advertising when they tried to say this game was realistic, because they did add some serious customization here to get things really intricate. But obviously in other ways it's really not realistic. People can't run and jump like monkeys and still get perfect shots in real life. Yeah. Alright, so those are the basics. Now I'm going to get into some more sophisticated stuff. So, in the notes that you read, I talked about there being an energy science to how reality actually works when it comes to this. So, what that is number one, everything is energy. We've scientifically proven that. Matter is an illusion. Everything is actually energy. It gives the illusion of reality just because it's dense enough to actually resist our touch to varying degrees. But according to scientists, we never actually touch anything. What we're feeling is the magnetic repulsion. You ever put two magnets together and try and get them to repel and then try to push them together? You reach a point where it's never actually fully touching, but it feels like it is, right? Well, the same thing apparently gives us the illusion of touch. What we're actually feeling is not the actual surface of the object, supposedly, but the energy of it. But everything's all energy, so the surface is really an illusion anyways. It's really interesting stuff. But the reason that's so important is because there's another level to this. Movement is not necessarily what we think it is. The latest scientific theories actually confirm, and in some ways have proven to some extent, what mystics have been saying for thousands of years. The part that I talked about when it comes to ancient monks and indigenous people, samurai, this stuff has been studied. Our movement, our precision, our perfection, our human potential, our superhuman potential has been studied for thousands of years. And I do mean superhuman potential from a scientific sense, not some theoretical woo-woo stuff. Even magic has now been scientifically proven to some extent, because mind over matter has been proven real to the point that we can actually remotely affect things at a distance. And I mean any distance. If we can focus on it, we can affect it. Where focus goes, energy goes, is literally the scientific quote from one of the scientists that teach these things. Now, how does this apply to gaming? Well, remember how Bruce Lee moved so fast they couldn't actually pick it up with the camera? They kept having to ask him to slow down. Have you heard about that? Remember the 2-inch punch? And then the 2-finger 2-inch touch? Got pretty crazy, right? Well, there's a little known technique to this, okay? We think, based on our own perception and how we're told to think about the world, that we have to move from where we are to where we want to be, right? We don't believe we can teleport, right? Well, to some extent, maybe we can. We just don't because we don't think we can, or we're used to not. Because when it comes to physical movement, there seems to be a significant question as to how much we actually have to move and what's really actually going on when we're moving. Scientists are now saying that our movement may actually just be a repeated teleport process, teleporting to different points that we think we have to meet along the line to give us the illusion of movement from one position to another. But when I go over advanced training from advanced practitioners like Master Samurai, there was a technique that was used for perfectly splitting a pea with a sword that I studied when I was younger, when I was a teenager, from a book that I got from the library that was a translated text from a Master Samurai. Okay? World-renowned. He was known as the best swordsman ever. He started out practicing splitting melons, but that got boring and too easy for him, and he wanted to be more precise. So he started practicing splitting a pea in half perfectly. Now, yeah. The way this works is literally mind over matter. And there's one more piece of science before I can explain the details of this and how to do it. We are not our brains. We are taught to think we are our bodies, and we are taught to think that we are our brains, and that is scientifically proven wrong now. In fact, our memories are not actually housed in our brain. That is a theory that has now been proven to be a myth. Our thoughts are housed somewhere else. I'm not going to get into that. There's theories about where it is. It doesn't matter. What matters is our body is a receiver and a reaction mechanism. We are not in our bodies. We can leave our bodies. And we can control things from a distance. That proves that we have the ability, mind over matter, to control our physical reality with thought, right? And that everything is simply reacting to these impulses that we call energy, which is basically light and information. Does that make sense? This is the science behind fiber optics, to some extent. It's all light and information, okay? Now, because of that, and because our movement seems to just be a teleporting series, if we can get our idea of how we have to move out of the way, we can move faster. We can get rid of these artificial limitations that we set on our own movement, okay? And it literally is thought-based. One of my teachers is Dave Austin. He's actually a sports coach who's trained the 49ers and a whole bunch of other athletic teams in various different athletic arenas, not just football. He's a human potential coach. Ugh, okay. I'm trying to eat and I'm talking too fast at the same time. Sorry, I'll slow down. He's a human potential coach who charges about $1,000 an hour. I've been trained by him and a whole bunch of other world experts. But, for example, when he was training a tennis player who was having trouble being too slow, he started complimenting him on how fast he was able to move his hands. Now, because he believed he was getting faster, he got faster. He believed he was fast, so he became fast. It's literally mind over matter. Okay? We've proved this to such an extent that scientific experiments have proved that we can actually remotely twist and untwist DNA strands in a bottle across the room with our minds. Yes. Mind over matter is a literal scientifically proven thing now. So the idea of magic and mind over matter that's been taught for thousands of years has been scientifically proven true in different ways. Energy healing is also another one. What they call spiritual energy, science has now called subtle energy or bioelectric energy. There are different forms of subtle energy. Subtle energy is a category. But basically, anything more subtle than physical energy is classified as subtle energy. It's less dense, so it's faster. And it's less solid. Like, for instance, we actually have cameras that can view ghosts. We've proven other realities, other dimensions exist, and other entities exist there. We can see them. Okay? But the reason they don't seem solid is because they are operating in a higher dimension with a higher vibrational energy, and our density is more than theirs. Their density is so much less that our body's energy can pass through theirs without resistance. You can feel the resistance. There's a slight resistance and a slight tingling and static sensation, but not much. I've experienced this myself. And I know other people who are ghost hunters and scientists who experiment with this stuff. But yeah, this stuff is now scientifically proven. Okay? It's all a matter of energy density. There are also techniques we can use to actually decrease our own energy density, and that seems to be how people can actually learn to levitate and fly. But I won't get into that right now. So, because we're all energy, and because energy can be controlled by the mind, and because our energy seems to actually teleport rather than actually complete a full speed movement, your ability to aim in this game or do anything else with your physical body may be more limited to your thought process than anything else. So, first thing we have to do is give you that information to help your subconscious mind understand the concept. Basically installing software, mental software, in your mental operating system that says you can do superhuman movement. Okay? And negates the limitations you had in your head before you heard all this stuff that tell you you can only move at a certain speed. Okay? Now, there are deeper techniques we can get into on this, even using hypnotherapy and altered states of consciousness facilitated through what they call brain entrainment software and programs. Basically a form of sound therapy in some cases. But the bottom line is you have to do your best to get rid of the negative limiting beliefs that are inaccurate and install the scientific understanding of what you're truly capable of and believe in it enough to actually act on it and be able to do it. Okay? The more you're able to clear your mind and focus on the positive and just focus on what you want to do, the better. So, this is where learning to manage your emotions and your thoughts comes in. Number one, you don't want to think. Have you seen The Last Samurai? Okay. No mind. What does that mean? No mind. You don't remember that? When Tom Cruise is training with the swords, he's sitting there thinking too much. He's overanalyzing it, right? And the guys come up and tell him, no mind. And he doesn't understand the concept. He doesn't believe it's possible. They smack him again. No mind. What they're trying to convey in language that we don't fully understand from our culture is that you need to stop thinking. You can be an observer, a silent observer. This is taught in meditation schools around the world. It doesn't matter what culture. Native American, Egyptian, it doesn't matter. All of them. The core spiritual principles taught in every major religion are identical. Yes, real spiritual traditions actually teach a science. They teach a holistic science. So it's a science of mind, it's a science of spiritual energy, and it's a science of the physical world. It is a deeper energy science than most people comprehend. And over the last 200 years, scientists have finally developed the technology to be able to observe, measure, and test this stuff, and are now proving most of what spiritual mystics have been saying for thousands of years true. Okay? Yeah. So, we treat the mind like a computer, and the thoughts and beliefs like mental software. You have to go in, and you have to instill positive programs that allow you greater potential, and you have to delete the old programs that are not accurate and limiting your beliefs. Does that make sense? Because this really does come down to the power of faith. But it's not faith based on ignorant assumption, because then you're going to have doubts. It's faith based on what they call an inner knowing or proof, experiential proof. Okay? This is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Okay? In Socratic philosophy, Socrates focused on getting people to understand the difference between what they believe and what they know. This is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. What you know is information. We call it information now. Back then, they just called it what you know. Knowledge. Wisdom is what you know to be true because it's been proven through your experience. Most people spend most of their lives operating on rumor and theory alone. They don't know much of anything because they don't experience much. They don't bother to. And they have a lot of mistaken beliefs because of that. They don't actually test their theories like we do in science. This is where you get stupid assumptions and misinterpretations and all kinds of communication problems, misunderstandings. We don't take the time to actually confirm our theories. And it causes us all kinds of problems. It creates artificial limiting beliefs that screw us up. And it creates communication issues of the wazoo. It has literally been the reason for the destruction of some relationships and marriages. Yeah, as a counselor and therapist, I can absolutely verify that. It's so ridiculous, our level of assumption and miscommunication, that destroys relationships. Yeah, it's ridiculous. So, this is all relevant because we need to actually focus on giving you, like I'm doing right now, that's the point of training. I am teaching you the scientific principles of what's true and why it's true, and debunking the wrong beliefs in your head. As I do that, that clears the air of all the confusion and conflicting beliefs. So when you're actually trying to do this stuff, you don't have doubts coming up, say, wait a minute, I don't know if I'm really able to do that. Is it just his personal theory, or is it true? Can I trust this? Is it true for everybody, or is it just true for some people? Am I capable of this? You have all kinds of interfering doubts and misconceptions and conflicting beliefs that get in your way. Make sense? So, we have to clear the air. Number 2, there's techniques for reprogramming your mind in a very experiential way, that your mind doesn't know the difference between reality and what you're imagining. There's much more to this, but that's as deep as I'll go for that right now. But in my advanced trainings, I teach all kinds of stuff beyond this. It's a huge, deep science. But what matters is we can actually get to the point where we can create visualizations that actually reprogram our subconscious mind to do things perfectly. And a lot of people think we can't be perfect. Well, you don't want a surgeon who doesn't cut you imperfectly, right? Especially when doing brain surgery. If your doctor doesn't perform your brain surgery perfectly, and he accidentally cuts something in your brain, you're dead. Or you're brain dead. You know, it can seriously disrupt and destroy your functioning. You want him to be perfect, right? Well, they can be perfect. They have to hone their skills. How do you do that? Number one, you have to believe you can. Number two, visualization and practice. There are two ways that we get information into the subconscious mind. Number one is through repetition. Number two is through experience. Actually, there's the third one that requires changing altered states. So, have you ever heard of altered states before? Okay. Okay. So, we have different modes. You ever heard an athlete talk about being in the zone? Okay. Well, what that actually is, it's taught in The Last Samurai a little bit, and it's taught a little bit more in The Legend of Bagger Vance with Will Smith and, I could remember his name earlier. I can't remember right now. Anyways, you can go watch it. It's fascinating. But in that movie, Will is taught to actually visualize what he wants to do, not think about it from there and just let his body do it. So it goes back to the mental software concept and the fact that our body is just reaction. It's a reaction mechanism, okay? If we create the idea of the perfect movement in our heads as quickly and efficiently as possible, then to whatever extent we're not having interference from our subconscious limiting beliefs, we can actually tell our body what to do and it will just do it perfectly. Does that make sense? In the movie The Peaceful Warrior, which is about one of my trainers from Berkeley, gold medal winning athlete and athletic trainer, who broke world records, he has one of his students throw him wrenches. And without looking at the wrench or even in the direction that his student is in, he perfectly catches every single time the wrenches that are thrown to him. And when his student asks how he does it, he says, the body is just a reflex organ. It just does what it's told. So again, this demonstrates that what gets in our way is our own doubts and vague concepts of how to do things. Now, there's another analogy that's used here. You ever watch anybody tobogganing down the hill, a snowy hill, or skiing? Okay, so the first time they do it, it's fresh snow, there's no path, right? So they carve out a path on the way down, right? Well, the next time they go down, they can't just carve out a new path. They're going to have a tendency to go down the same old path, right? So the brain works the same way. The more you do something, the more it creates a hypothetical groove that you follow. Getting in the groove, getting in the zone, is about getting into a clear state of mind in which you are purely acting out of conscious control of your body and just giving your body commands and it does them. Does that make sense? When most people are moving their body, they are being very intentional about every step of the process. If a martial artist goes to punch somebody, most people, the way they've been trained, or not trained, will just focus on moving their arm out and back, right? Martial artists like Bruce Lee and the samurai I was talking about don't do that. I was actually introduced to this first when I was a kid playing basketball. I had a coach in junior high who told me, before you throw the ball, visualize in your mind, close your eyes if you need to, and visualize what you want to do before you do it. And then open your eyes, do not think, just do, just act out what you visualized. When you do that, if there's no interfering beliefs and doubts, you do it perfectly. Unless your body does not have the proper muscle and electrical structure to do that. Like, for example, you can't just deadlift 1,000 pounds when you've never done it before. Okay? So that's why martial artists practice over and over and over again. Number one, they are building the muscle and electrical systems they need to be able to move properly, move their energy properly. You have to be able to build in the movement functions, and you have to build in the energetic flow functions to get the information where you need to go it and get the energy to flow fastest as possible, right? And you're also, through repetition, programming in the movement subconsciously. This is why you should not practice over and over again without a coach when you're learning something, because you aren't always aware of every single little movement your body is making. And if you make that movement wrong over and over again, you're making a bad habit that's actually sabotaging you, right? So, when you're training, number one, you don't do it for too long because you can get worn out and start messing up. Number two, you do it either with a coach or in a mirror to make sure your movement is perfect as possible. And if you mess up, don't worry about it, but don't repeat it. You make sure you do it differently, even to the point of counterbalancing it. Now, what I mean by that, I'll give an example for. Let's say you're throwing a ball, or you're shooting a gun in here, and you're off to the left. You can purposely counterbalance that by shooting the same distance off to the right on purpose. Does that make sense? And it's sort of like some of the audio technologies where you split the difference in the different ears and it creates a single sound in the brain. Your brain is actually splitting the distance in between the two movements and saying, no, I need to go in the middle. And then you reinforce that by doing it as perfectly as you can from then on. You don't want to ever repeat a mistake twice. That way, you don't create a proverbial groove in your head for doing the wrong thing. And you're always reinforcing to the best of your ability, doing things perfectly. But there's another level to this. Remember how I said the brain doesn't know the difference between when you're doing it physically and when you're doing it in your head? You make sure you perfect this by doing it a bunch in your head. Astronauts use this technique. A whole bunch of professionals around the world use this technique. You visualize doing it perfectly over and over and over again in your head. Your body actually has been scientifically proven, when you're just imagining it, to stimulate all the appropriate muscles in your body as if you were actually doing it physically. So it's actually still training your body. In fact, they've actually done studies that basically have proven that you can lift weights in your head or exercise in your head, and it's proven to actually give your body the effect of the exercise even though you didn't do it physically. It's absolutely fascinating stuff. But I learned about that from a NASA astronaut trainer. He was a scientist. And they noticed that as the astronauts were doing this, after they implemented this technique, not only were they able to perform better, but their bodies were changing as if they had done the work. They actually were growing muscle, as if they'd been doing the work they hadn't done. That's why they set up this technique. And sure enough, people could actually get the same amount or even more, even better muscle growth from just mentally exercising than you do if you're physically exercising. Because not only are you getting the same energetic movement and effect when you're doing it in your mind, but you're also not screwing up. So you don't get the injuries. You're not getting the injuries that you would if you mess up and move wrong while you're exercising. And number two, you're moving perfectly, so you're stimulating your muscles perfectly to properly grow the muscle you need exactly the right way, and there's no imbalance and interference in the muscle structure. Does that make sense? Or if you have been doing both forms, you can use the mental to override the physical if you've been messing up. Does it make sense? Fascinating, fascinating science. It's amazing stuff. So, isn't it? Mind makes reality, I'm telling you. They actually have now come to believe this theory in science, even though they haven't fully proven it yet. But mind makes reality. We live in a Peter Pan world. It's just a collective world, and it's not one mind creating it, it's all of them. And there are higher level minds that are working through the lower levels. But that's as far as I'll get into that for now. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I give other classes on that. But yeah, it's absolutely fascinating stuff. The mind literally does shape and create reality. So, how we use this is doing the visualizations, but you don't visualize the movement. You visualize the end result. For example, if you're throwing a baseball, you do not imagine yourself making the movement. You imagine yourself throwing the ball exactly where you want it to go. Now, there are other trainings, and people have done this successfully, where you do visualize the movement. But it can mess you up. So it's best just to focus on the end result. When I was doing basketball, I did both. I did visualizations of holding it perfectly and then throwing, especially because I was jumping before I threw it, because I was doing free throws with the main way that I practiced this. But you can also just focus on throwing it perfectly, feel it. If you do this visualization with your full focus, you can feel it in your body as you do this. You feel what your body knows it needs to do. Trust your mind to know what it needs to do to get the end result. And just focus on the ball going through the hoop. And if you do that, your body is typically smart enough, in my experience, to know what it needs to do and do it perfectly. Same with the example that I gave where the guy was having the student throw wrenches to him, and he wasn't even looking at it. You just have the intention that you will catch it perfectly, and visualize it being in your hand exactly where you need it to be. And you just tell your body to do the movement and let it do its thing. It sounds bizarre. Yes, exactly. And that is what people call being in the zone. You have trained your mind to be clear and focused and just flow with your intention. You let the body flow with the movement. Does that make sense? You're just allowing your body to follow its instructions that you're giving it. Does that make sense? Now, obviously, if you're getting upset, you're getting frustrated, that can interfere. What do you do about that? Okay, because there's the brain science to this too, because it's not just emotional energy and it's not just in your head. The energy is real. It's actual, what they call spiritual energy in some cases, okay? They call it biological energy in science. But it's the same thing. Two different terminologies, same thing, okay? You can actually see this stuff on infrared. When we get emotional, we create energy, and that energy has a certain vibration. I have a chart that shows the different emotions and the different energy frequencies they have been scientifically measured to be on, okay? And what we call negative emotions is really negative emotions. And it makes a huge difference. This goes back to what I was starting to talk about a minute ago when I was talking about altered states. So we have different modes that we get into, where we're in conscious control or not in conscious control. When we're in what they call fight or flight mode, we're not being conscious, we're being subconscious and reactive. This is the difference between action and reaction, or response and reaction. We do not want to be in reaction. We are not being conscious, we are not thinking clearly. When we're in fight or flight mode, when we're scared or we're angry, we actually literally change our focus and function from the frontal lobe, the front of our head, where we're in conscious control, and it actually transfers to what they call the hind brain, the mammalian brain, the monkey mind, the lizard brain. They have different terms for it in science. Different cultures, different departments make up their own terms. It's normal. It's a problem in science. They don't get on the same page very easily. But it's all the same thing. What matters is that you understand that that is a reactive mode and it is negative. You are operating on your subconscious software. You are not in conscious control. Does that make sense? When people are talking about going automatic, they see red and they lose control, that's what they're doing. Their body is being so overridden by their emotional lack of control that their body has turned on autopilot. And if they were abused as children or mistreated in any way, if they were yelling, throwing things, your body acts how you subconsciously, not consciously, have been programmed to respond to a situation. You will mimic what you've seen other people do. Does that make sense? And this is where subconscious therapy comes in, because sometimes we have to go in there and reprogram that crap because it's really bad behavior, like in the case of violence. Okay? But it puts you in a different mode. So if you're in a reactionary, negative, stressed out mode when you're trying to play the game, you can't shoot properly. Sometimes we can get so upset we're literally shaking, right? Well, what that is this energy gets so intense, it's all vibration, okay? The frequency that we're operating on in that emotional state changes the vibrational wave pattern of the energy. And it can resonate so much that just like when you see singers sing a high note and break glass, it's resonance. It's because the molecules are literally vibrating so fast and so intensely that it breaks them. It breaks the bond between the molecules. That's how that works. We actually have the technology now to do the same thing to biological organisms, such as viruses and cancer cells. We can actually treat cancer that way. I'm getting a hold of this technology. It's all about resonant vibration. Okay? Yeah. There was somebody actually did a TED Talk on it. It's gone viral. But this is the same thing that's happening in your body. When you get emotional, and the reason that you start shaking is because the vibration becomes so strong, the energy becomes so strong and so intense that you literally are shaking your body with the vibration of your emotions. And if you hold on to that negative emotion and don't release it, it's been scientifically proven that the claims of the Chinese and other medicine traditions from other places in the world that talk about this stuff and understand this science are right. The negative emotional energy can get stored in the body if you do not release it, and it will cause illness. It can cause cancer. For example, it has been scientifically proven that people can get cancer from holding a grudge. And if you do the work to let that grudge go, if you do the therapy work or just make a conscious decision to release it and let it go, that cancer can literally cease to exist. Not only that, but remember mind over matter at a distance? And I talked about spiritual healing. We can do this from a distance for each other. I have a video on ultrasound. So there's a video of a room, a medical room at a hospital in China. And you're also seeing the tech on the working on the screen of an ultrasound machine, and you're seeing on that screen the video of a real-life tumor in somebody's body. And there are meditative practitioners who are trained in mind over matter science. They come in and chant for about 3.5 minutes a word that to them means it is healed. They see it as being already done. Remember how I said focus on the goal that you want? Well, this is very, very specific. You focus on it already being done. Literally, the cancer is gone, okay? And you get to watch on the screen as they chant, and sometimes the changes on the screen literally are timed with the chant on the screen. You literally watch the tumor fade out of existence in phases. It literally goes from being one size to the outer layer fading, and it revealing underneath a smaller version of the tumor, and then it does it again and it's even smaller, and then it just flat out disappears from reality. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it is actually possible to do that kind of stuff. And even if you've got doubts that conflict with it, and it still might happen, you're still going to be a lot more resistant, and it's going to be a lot more difficult for it to happen, because you've got conflicting beliefs in a positive way that counter the negative. And it'll make it easier for you to learn more about this kind of stuff and learn to use these techniques and use mind over matter to get rid of it if you do get it. Does that make sense? So, what I've just talked about is a scientific proof that we literally are reprogramming reality, okay, based on our beliefs. So, the way we use this is we visualize the end result that we want, okay? We visualize ourselves literally shooting the person that we're aiming at, okay? You make it a split-second thought, and that's it. But all the lead up to that, when you're practicing, visualizing in your head, and when you're practicing in game, is helping to create the program that you're implementing when you do that. So it's not just an in that moment program. That's why you practice, because you're ingraining and honing that program to be very precise and programming your belief in it. Does that make sense? So before you shoot, visualize in your head getting a perfect instant aim on that head and pulling the trigger. Does that make sense? So you do that. Yeah. Well, there's competitive beliefs that we've been brainwashed with that I address in other trainings, where I go deeper into that and reprogramming those limiting beliefs to be able to adopt positive beliefs of just being able to enjoy it and have fun. And I do cover some of that stuff in my trainings, especially when I'm coaching people directly. But I don't have time for that right now. So the main things that I'm going into is just the science that you need to understand about how this stuff works and how to implement it. Okay. If you find that you're still having trouble with the emotional stuff after this, because there's more that I have to talk about. There's one more technique that I have to give you. Then we can go into some of that stuff, and I can actually work with you directly to address those specific mental issues that are causing that reaction, and we can get rid of that very quickly and easily. But the next step is, because of the emotional issues, you need to do your best to stay calm, keep your head clear, and your body clear of the emotional energy. If you start to get upset, you don't condemn yourself for it, you just stop yourself and release it. The quickest, easiest way to do that is through breathing. Okay? You've probably heard this kind of stuff in yoga or meditation training or different things like that. Yeah, they teach this stuff in hospitals now. They teach it in sports. This kind of stuff has gone mainstream. They're even teaching it in schools. I know, because I know parents who've talked to me about their kids learning this stuff in school and how much it helped. And I also know teachers. Actually, some of my students are teachers, and they teach this stuff in their classes. And they've even had me review the material that they're using to do that, and I've had to correct some stuff where there was some misconception involved in the curriculum. But overall, it's really good, really powerful stuff. But what you do is you focus on breathing it out. You can even use a visualization to do this, especially when you're first learning it. The more multisensory and therefore visual you are, the better. You want to make it experiential as much as possible, because then it goes from a belief or an idea into your subconscious mind as a knowledge of experience, the wisdom. Does that make sense? So, if you visualize it as like a smoke coming out, you want to send it into the earth to get recycled and cleared. The earth acts like a filter, and it'll clear and convert negative energy to positive energy. So you just set the intention, you put the thought into it as you're doing this, to send the energy into the earth and come back to you clean. And you can literally visualize that loop if you want. Or you can just literally visualize it going in and coming back real quick. Split-second instantaneous thing. Make sense? And the more you do it, of course, the faster and easier it'll be, because you've created that mental groove. You created the mental software. And all you have to do is think about it and it'll be done. Make sense? That visualization time, the mental cueing time, the intention work gets faster and easier, because it gets so ingrained that you actually just really fast have the thought go through your head and send it right into your body, and it's done. So the more you do it, the faster and easier it'll get. But you breathe it out, and you release the emotional energy, you release the negative thinking, and you change your focus just to enjoying yourself and developing yourself. Remember, it's not really much of a recreational activity if you're not enjoying it. So you want to focus on doing it for fun and developing yourself. You want to hone these skills. These are literal skills. These are skills of thought process, skills of focus, and skills of self-control, self-discipline, as it used to be called. You are honing your self-control. You are also honing your energetic systems. And nutrition plays a part in this as well. If you don't have all the nutrients and energy you need to be able to give your body what it needs to be able to rebuild itself in ways that better facilitate this stuff, like building muscle, building speed mechanisms, then you might have some problems. So when it comes to athletic training, we often have to do dietary change training as well, and detoxification. But obviously when you're playing on a computer, it doesn't take that much movement. This probably won't be an issue. But it can be an issue for clarity of mind. If you have headaches, if you have brain fog, if you have trouble focusing, these can all be directly related to nutritional issues and toxification issues. So there's a negative side and a positive side, giving your body what it needs and getting rid of what interferes with it. Make sense? So you want to focus on that on the mental level and the physical level, giving you what you need, getting rid of what you don't and what interferes with you. Okay? So, if you get upset, you focus on the positive perspective after getting rid of the energy. You clear it, you reframe your mindset, and you move again. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to analyze your behavior. You'll naturally become aware of certain things. If you're having trouble, if you're not doing something as well, if you need to tweak your settings, you'll notice. You'll have performance issues. And the better you get to know your general performance, the better you'll notice when you're getting tired and you're starting to mess up, or there are certain things you do, like certain zoom levels you're using, that you're having trouble that you don't on other zoom levels, and you know you need to tweak those settings. Does that make sense? So you don't want to be sitting here thinking about all this stuff. That gets in the way. Hence the no mind recommendation. Okay? So you want to focus on being, as much as you can, the observer of what's going on and just choosing to respond. You look at what's going on and you choose what to do about it. That's it. Does it make sense? Okay. So that's the mental focus stuff that's involved behind all of this. And the better you do this, the easier it'll get, the more you'll be able to enjoy yourself playing, and the better you'll do. Make sense? Now, yeah. It can be difficult when you're trained to be competitive. I mean, we're brainwashed into a lot of this crap in our families, in school, in society in general. We're very competitive. We're very war-minded, really, is where it comes from. Competition mentality in the extreme is what leads to war. When we think there's not enough and we need to take from other people, or we think that we don't want to be inferior to other people and we need to compete to look good to other people. It's all competitive nonsense. It's not really how it works. If we just focus on doing our best and honing our skills, we'll just keep doing better and better, and we'll do better than most people anyways, because most people don't do that. Make sense? So you can do that without trying to. And this is where do or do not there is no try comes into play from Star Wars. If we focus on trying to do it, we overthink it and we mess up. We just want to believe that we can do it and choose to do it. Does that make sense? And either we accomplish it well or we don't. But we did something. There is no trying, there's only doing. It's just a question of how well you did it. And you hone different aspects like your mouse sensitivity or your muscles or your nutrition to be able to do it better. But it's all about just focusing on doing it and perfecting your ability to do it well. Does that make sense? And if you just focus on that, number one, you'll have more fun because you won't be stressing about it. And number two, you will naturally get better. So you don't have to worry about it. It happens effortlessly, and you can enjoy it because you can sit here and focus on and appreciate your growth. That's how you stay positive, even when playing games that most people consider competitive. You do not have to be a competitive athlete, whether it be in gaming or whether it be in sports. That's where you get the positive sportsman-like conduct and behavior and being able to be friends afterwards, even if you lose to somebody. We don't have to treat it like it's a big deal, and we don't have to make it something we get angry about. We do, but it's for the wrong reasons. It's wrong thinking. There is nothing beneficial about doing that kind of stuff. And we're all good at something. We all have innate skills. We just need to find what we're good at. Maybe what we're doing isn't, what we're trying to do isn't the best for us. Maybe we're not following our natural skills. Sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes people can be not good at one sport, they switch to a different sport, and they're freaking amazing. Okay? So there is a level of capacity with everything we're trying to do, and we have to be willing to accept that to some extent. But, as I've talked about, even if we think we've reached our limits, it doesn't mean we actually have. The 4-minute mile was believed to be a limit for years and years, decades and decades, before it was finally proven that we could beat it. So if we do this kind of work, we can explore our ability to do better, and we can always focus on trying to do better. But we never really know what our full potential is, so trying to make a big deal about not reaching our ideal goal could be imaginary self-sabotage. We may not be capable of it, or it might just take a whole lot of work to get there. Mental work, physical work, nutritional work, whatever. Make sense? All we need to focus on is personal development and having fun. And when it comes to work, we should all be following our passions. If we're not doing that, we're in the wrong job anyways, or we're approaching it wrong. Okay? That's why it should never be a negative upset competition. Yes, we can have a tendency to get upset at mistreatment if somebody's cheating or doing something wrong, or there's flaws in the game that are messing us up. That can be frustrating. But it doesn't mean that the emotion is bad. It's okay to experience unpleasant reactions to things. If we experience something we don't like, to an extent, we're going to have an issue with that. But we don't have to dwell on it. We don't have to blow it out of proportion and get all angry about it. Instead of focusing on problems and dwelling on or upset about the problem, you focus on solutions. I call this solution orientation rather than problem orientation. When people get into self-judgment, self-pity, victim mentality, they're really self-sabotaging. None of that thinking is beneficial. It's all detrimental self-sabotage. You do what you can to do your best, and you accept what you cannot change. This is where you get the old adage, give me the wisdom to change what I can, and the wisdom to accept what I can't, and to know the difference. Make sense? Yeah, that's another way of putting it. But this is specifically clarifying the difference between what you know you can do and what you think you can do, and accepting your limitations, even if they're momentary limitations. Like, a lot of my clients, especially in therapy, are coming to me to work on issues that they want to change, that they know they can change, like a tendency to react in trauma and mistreat people because they were abused as a child. Okay? We are taught to judge the crap out of ourselves. But that doesn't help anything. That's just self-sabotage. We just beat ourselves up and feel even worse about ourselves. That puts us in a negative emotional state that even more distorts our health. These things have been proven. Our emotions, just like the cancer, carry over into our body and create ill health. The cells that we create in a negative state are distorted. It can even distort our DNA. Positive emotional states like love can actually heal our DNA. This stuff is absolutely profound mind over matter science that is scientifically proven. Negative emotional states are detrimental on every level and screw up your functioning every single time. So you want to get out of that state as quickly as possible, do what you can to change it if you can, and just focus on what you can do, no matter what. Make sense? We solve what problems we can, we accept the way things are if we can't do anything about it right now. That's what it boils down to. And if we do that, then we can maintain a positive emotional state as a general rule. And even when we drop, we don't drop long, we don't have a bad day, we just have an unpleasant momentary experience and we move on. It's in the past. We don't have to feel now about things in the past. Make sense? Some of these things can be difficult for people to adopt, and it can take time and training and practice, and that's where coaching comes in. Where you get people who are monitoring us, because sometimes we do it and we don't even realize we're doing it because we're so used to it. And we can get reactive and in a negative state. We're in the hindbrain and we're acting on automatic pilot. So that's why sometimes it is absolutely necessary. We can't always do this stuff by ourselves, because if we're being subconscious or we don't know the information and the skills we need to be able to do it, and our coach doesn't know to be able to address it because we haven't seen it yet, we don't have all the information we need to be able to do what we need to do, or we don't have the awareness to do it because we're not in the right state of mind. And our coach can pull us out of it. They can pull us out of it, they can give us pointers, they can give us techniques, they can give us reminders. Make sense? So just like in sports, we should have coaches and trainers for every aspect of life. Because experts that have spent a long time doing things, number one, they know what works and what doesn't. Number two, they know the beneficial stuff. They know how to avoid the detrimental stuff, number three. And They make it a whole lot faster and easier to learn all that stuff. And we get to avoid a lot of crap in the process. So it only makes sense for us to train in these different areas. And a big part of the problem is our lack of education. Does that make sense? So, don't beat yourself up if you screw up. Accept what you don't know and haven't been able to implement yet because you haven't been properly trained in doing so. And just put in the work. And that's how you accept even your flaws in the moment. Even if you're misbehaving and mistreating people, if you're doing your best, you have to accept that or you just drive yourself insane. And you sabotage yourself. Does that make sense? So the psychological levels of this are extremely important. They affect everything you do. That's why I'm taking so much time to go into the science behind this stuff. Because it's critical. It makes all the difference in the world. It changes the state in which your body operates and your brain operates. So you have to address this stuff in order to be able to do well. This is the difference between everyday mediocre people who do things half-ass and experts in every area, whether it be sports, whether it be gaming, whether it be medicine, surgeons, like I was talking about, perfect surgery. This is the difference. Understanding and implementing these sciences, techniques, tools, and systems makes all the difference in the world and takes you to such a different level, you can even be called superhuman. Superhuman ability has actually been proven, just like spiritual healing. It's just a different level of functioning based on the higher sciences of energy. Energy science is basically the bridge between traditional scientific views and traditional spiritual views. Most of what mystics have been saying for thousands of years about superhuman ability have been proven scientifically true. People just had trouble accepting it before we really learned the actual science of energy and how reality works. Now we understand why everything works the way it does. There's a little bit more to it when it comes to some superhuman abilities like psychic ability, and I get into that in other classes. We don't need to go over that for game training. But the rest of this stuff is directly applicable to your training in game and how you need to approach that. Make sense? All right. So I've covered everything that. So yeah, do you have any other questions? All right. Then I'm going to call this a close. Yeah, most people don't realize how much science there is to this. Yeah, I went pretty deep. I try to be very thorough and give people as much of what they need in efficient amount of time as possible. I might have overdone a little bit, but more information is better than less, right? But it's up to you how much of this you want to focus on and implement. I'm coaching Winter, and some of my other friends have expressed interest in that. So I'm probably going to be more actively coaching, especially when I have actual official students in playing with us. I'll be coaching. But if you want to be one of those people, if you let me know that, I will focus more on doing this kind of stuff with you and giving you pointers when I see that you're like getting upset or having trouble in some area. I can focus on, hey, maybe if you try this, it'll work better, that kind of thing. But some people get defensive, so I don't typically want to do that without getting people's permission. Or talking to other people around them instead of actually talking directly to them. So, it's up to you how you want to act on that, but that is the kind of stuff that I do offer. Alright, so that ends my class for today. Glad you could join me.